Hi, it's me again, Bunsen Cole, with lesson 2 of our Visual Maths entry level, which is based on CGP, Functional Skills Mathematics. In the last lesson, we looked at some meaning, the meaning of mathematics, the meaning of numbers, and what they're made up of. And I gave you some tasks to do. I hope you've done them because I'll discuss them with you later. And but in maths, you have 4 functions you have to do. You add, you subtract, you multiply, you divide. Sometimes you do a combination of all of them. Those 4 functions are the 4 functions you'll always do in mathematics, no matter how complex the problem is. Okay, well, we'll take it a step at a time, and today we're going to we'll take it a step at a time, and in this lesson we're going to look at adding and subtracting. As I said, in a real life problem, you would have to add or subtract numbers. You need to know when to add or when to subtract in real life. The signs for adding is plus, and the sign for subtracting is the minus sign, the dash. When you add, you get total, that is, you put everything together. There are different words you can use. Find the sum of, what is the total of, then you know that you have to add. Then in subtraction, you have to find differences. That's when we say minus. Usually when you subtract from a number, you get a smaller number remaining. Let's look at when to add. A real life problem. Christy is ordering some tickets online. The cost of the ticket, booking, fees, and delivery are shown below. Now, one thing I want you to observe is how I have ordered this list. Right? Remember, units under units, tens under tens, and if you have a bigger number, hundreds under hundreds in columns. So the ticket values are £15, the booking fee is £2, and the delivery is £3. What is the solution? You only add the price of the ticket and booking fee. You do not add the delivery fee because Christy is picking up the ticket. So you need to make sure you understand the question. If you don't understand the question, you will not be able to do your sum right. This is why you have to get your pen, your notebook, so you can make note. One of the advice I struggled to pass on to my students when I was lecturing is that most students just like to type notes as opposed to actually using physical pen, and making notes on notepads. It's not every time you want to look at notes or examples, you will have to go to the computer. And not only that, but in maths, most exercise you do would be on paper. So get your pen, get your notebook, or pieces of paper, that whichever you feel comfortable with, to make your notes. Okay? So the solution to the problem I've given you, you need to decide when to add, when to subtract, what to add, and what to subtract. And in this case, you do not add the delivery fee. Why? Because Christy is picking up the ticket, so she doesn't have to pay for it to be delivered. I shop mostly in Iceland because I have my groceries delivered to me. This habit started during the pandemic. And if I shop, my total shopping is valued less than, I think, £40, then I have to pay delivery fee. Incidentally, it's £3. But if it's more than £40, I do not have to pay. So I sort of budget myself to make sure that I save myself the delivery fee. And of course, they offered some discounts as well, but I will not go into detail with that. So the point I'm trying to make is, in real life, there are problems. All mathematical questions is a problem, and you have to solve it by thinking about it, making notes, underlying important bits before you can go ahead and solve it. Okay, so you do not have to add the delivery fee because Chris is picking up the ticket, so she won't have to pay. So what is the solution? You simply add the £15 and the booking fee of £2, which is £17. And do not forget to write your answer out properly. Right? Another thing is, because it's money she's dealing with, don't just write 17. Put your pound sign. The pound sign is very, very important. That will add meaning to what you're doing. So you see, units is not just about the position of the numbers. Units is about the meaning you add to the information you're providing. Okay. Let's look at example 2. In this case, we're working with hours. Asha is cleaning her house. How long will it take to clean the room and all the other places in the house? Asha is cleaning her house. How long it takes to clean each room is shown below. How long does it take to clean the whole house? Again, you need to look at the details, the information you're provided with. Get your pen, underline what you're not sure about, and then you can think about it. Okay, kitchen 2 hours, dining room 1 hour, living room 2 hours, bedroom 1 hour. So you need to find out what will you do to get the total number of hours you spent cleaning your house. This is the solution. You can either list down the hours, or if you can just calculate it in your head, you can calculate it, but in an exam you have to show you're working. So you need to add together the times for all the rooms. So the calculation is 2 for the kitchen, 1 for the dining room, 2 for the living room, and 1 for the bedroom. Add them up together and you'll have a total of 6 hours. The unit in this case is hours. Okay? You also need to know when to subtract, to take away. In this example, Warren is paying for some crisps. The crisps cost £2. He pays with a £10 note. How much change should he get? When you're dealing with money, if you're not smart and on the ball, you can lose out because you have a lot of scammers out there, so be careful. So the solution, you need to take how much the crisp costs from the £10 he paid. That's the change he gets when he used £10 to pay for his crisps. That would be what? Yes, £10 minus £2, which is £8. Don't forget to put your pound sign on. Let's look at example 2. Sybil works a 7 hours shift. Her notes on her timesheets are shown as follows. Picking, phones, packing. You have the hours there. How long did she spend packing? How long did she spend packing? To find the answer, we need to take the times we know from the total time she's at work. Okay? So, the calculation we need to do is, we add the information we know, and then we take it from the total time, and then you will see the difference. In this case, 7 hours minus 2 hours minus 4 hours, which means 1 hour was spent packing. There are other ways you can do it, in which you can maybe add the hours together and take them off the total time as I did below. That is 2 plus 4, which is 6, and then you say 7 minus 6 is 1 hour. You might need to be able to add and subtract. Let's look at this example. Suri. Suri orders salmon and then lemon tarts. She has a voucher of £2 off any meal she buys. How much does she have to pay for her meal? This example requires more than one calculations to find the answers. Okay, so here we go. Usually you see your menu, and then you look at the conditions, and then before you do your answer. The calculation has 2 stages. You add up the prices of the meal, then you take away the voucher, and then you'll have your answer, which is £12. Now we are all dependent on calculators to do our calculations. But remember that in maths exams, you have the non-calculator part, and then you have the calculator part. So it's important that while you need to use your calculator, you need to be able to do mental calculations as well. When you do not have to use calculators, write the numbers down before you start doing your work. Now, to do your subtraction, you write the numbers, the bigger numbers, above the smaller ones, and make sure you line them up. Remember what I said? Units under units, tens under tens, hundreds under hundreds. Okay? Working from right to left, take the bottom number away from the top. Okay? Now let's look at the examples here. I've given you some diagrams which will help you. Now, you got 4 steps: step 1, step 2, step 3, and then remember, it's always useful to check what you've done. That is step 4. You have to take 294 from 342. In other words, 342 minus 294. Note that if you look at the individual digits, under the unit column, you have to take 4 from 2, 2 minus 4. Likewise, under the tens column, you have to take 9 from 4, or 4 minus 9. So how do you do that? Although the whole numbers, the 342 is a bigger number than 294, but you need to work out the mechanics, what we call the mechanics of it. Now let's look at step 2. You start with the unit. 2 minus 4. Can you take 2 from 4? Let's look at the unit, the step 2. Okay, let's look at this example. You have to subtract 294 from 342. In other words, 342 minus 294. Remember to put your numbers, the bigger numbers at the top, the smaller number at the bottom. And then units under units, tens under tens, hundreds under hundreds. So, but in this case you have 342, and under the unit column you have to do 2 minus 4. It's not straightforward. You have to do something before you'll be able to do it, because the top number is bigger. You look at step 2. You take your units. 2 minus 4 you cannot. So what you need to do is, remember, 1 from the tens column is actually 10 in the units column. So borrow 1 from the 4 under the tens column and add it to the 2, So 10 plus 2 is 12. Now you can do your work. 12 minus 4 is 8. Then you go on to the next column. Remember, you've borrowed 1 from the 4. So that will leave 3 tens. Now, 3 minus 9, you cannot do it. So what you need to do is, you'll have to borrow 1 from the hundredths column, that is from the 3. Now 3, so 1 from the 3 is actually 100, but because it's the tens column you're working on, it's only 10. So the 1 to the 4 makes 14, but don't forget that it's not 4 anymore, it's now 3. So you're now left with 3 in the tens column at the top. So if you go to step 3 now, 3 minus 9, you cannot do it. So you'll have to borrow 1 from the 3 to make your tens column 13. 13 minus 9 is 4. Now you have 2 on the remaining on your hundredths column, and 2 minus 2 is 0. If you look at the bottom, I've made some notes for you so that you will understand what I've done at each stage. In the fourth section, where I say check answer, when you subtract and you get your answer, you need to do the opposite calculation so that to make sure you've got your answer right. So if you take 294 from 342 and you get 48, is it right or is it wrong? What you need to do is to check it. And to do that, take the answer and add it to one of those figures and you should be able to get your answer right. So you take 48, add it to 294, you will have 342. Or if you take 294 and add 48, you'll get the same thing. Now let's look at more examples of real life problem. Ed used to weigh 105 kilograms and now weighs 91 kilograms. How much weight has he lost? We're all fighting to lose weight, especially after the COVID. Write the bigger number on top of the small number and subtract each number in turn from right to left. And that is your solution. So 105 minus 91. If you take the units, 5 minus 1 is 4, that's very easy. But if you look at the terms, you have 0 minus 9. Can you do that? No. So you take the 1 from the hundredths column, put it to the tens column. That will make 10, and then 10 minus 9 is 1. And your answer, Ed has lost 14 kilograms. Now to use a calculator, you need to know how to use a calculator. And I'm pretty sure most of us do, really. The first thing you need to do is make sure your calculator is clear. And the answer screen is showing 0. And then you press your buttons carefully. Don't be in a rush. Okay? Enter the value of what you want to calculate. Okay? And make sure you check you press the button properly and the value is correct which you've entered. And then press your signs, whether it's add or subtract, and then you press your equal sign at the end of the calculation to get your answer. Okay, so you're using a calculator to subtract. Alright, James wants to buy a new fridge. James wants to buy a new fridge. One fridge cost £155 and another cost £130. What is the difference in price between the two fridges? Now this is a real life problem. He didn't say this minus that, that minus that. But as soon as you hear what is the difference, you should know that this is a subtraction sum. However, if you don't understand it, how are you going to be able to do the calculations? You would not. You see, so even when you're using your calculator, you need to be able to use it properly and key in the correct values in the correct order with the correct signs for calculation. Okay, solution. Look at the keys there. make sure your calculator is clear. It should be showing 0. And then 155, then press minus. 130 equals, you press enter, then you'll have 25. Don't just write down 25 though. You need to think about what the answers or the value of your answer is in the calculator, because the calculator will not tell you it is pounds or kilos is lost. You have to make sure you indicate the value. In this case, it's 25 pounds. That's the difference between the two fridges he wants to buy. Always check your answer by doing the opposite calculations. So if your answer was 12, then add 12 and 164 to get 176. Example 2, checking addition. What is 155 plus 12? Answer, 180. Is it right? You can use one of the two calculations to check your answers. Either you take your answer, 180, minus what you add, the minus 25, which you added to 155 to get 155, or you can take 180 minus 155 to get 25. Both checks are correct. You've done your sum right. Remember, when you check, you're only checking to make sure you did the right thing, you got the sum right. But it's important because it can be as part of your working in an exam and you might be able to get extra mark. So what have we learned? We've learned 6 things. To add means to increase, and you use the plus sign. To subtract means to reduce or to decrease. We use the minus sign. We need to read and understand the problem to know what calculations to do. It is important to align numbers with 2 or more digits correctly. In other words, units under units, tens under tens, hundreds under hundreds. Okay, if you don't do that, you will have some ridiculous result. Remember to carry 1 to the next column on the left if you have 10 or more, that is if you're adding. Remember to borrow and adjust when subtracting a larger digit from a smaller digit. So you borrow 1, add it to the unit column, automatically that 1 in front of whatever amount, say 2, becomes 12. But remember, you borrowed it from the tens column. So whatever was in that tens column reduces by 1. If you don't make that adjustment, your sum will be automatically run. And this principle is applied right through. But this is only when you're dealing with numbers, basic numbers. If you're dealing with time, measurements and stuff like that, the money, whatever you borrowed, if you're dealing with other measurements like, for example, time or kilograms or some, whatever you borrow will be bigger or smaller depending on the unit you're using. Okay? So, remember to borrow and adjust. We used to say when you borrow, you must carry. That's what they mean. Okay? To compensate. Always check that your answer is correct by doing the opposite calculation. If you subtract and you get an answer, if you want to check that your answer is correct, take the answer and add what you subtracted. Okay? And then I have some practice questions here for you. 8 practice questions. These are the practice questions you have to do to check that you understand the passage. Now, I hope you enjoyed your lesson, and the next lesson would be multiplying and dividing, which is in a week's time. Until then, thank you for listening.